So, since the COVID pandemic began back in March of 2020, from all the reports I've gathered, it seems like New York has not been particularly doing well. Those that can afford to leave have left, businesses and restaurants have been shut down, and there's a decent amount that have gone under. There's also been new waves of crime, and with the protests over the summer, there was also an issue involving policing and just leadership. So, today on this catching up, Andrew Yang has announced that he is running for mayor of New York City. And though he has no experience, and I mean no experience in politics or government, it seems like he may have a shot to win. The primary is on June 22nd, so about a month and a half from now. And I think it's a good idea just to kind of look into Andrew Yang, New York. Is that a good fit or not? Hey, what up? Hello, everyone, and I hope your week is going well. Alex Kapitko here for a little Friday/weekend catching up. Today, I want to talk about the city of New York and whether Andrew Yang can actually do a good job if he was mayor of the city. It's kind of a complicated question for me because I think there's kind of two layers to Andrew Yang and whether or not he would work as mayor of New York City. It's the ideological side and then the practical side. I'll elaborate more in a bit, but basically, what I think is that name recognition Andrew Yang has in his favor, character, likability, having creative solutions, brains, like all these things are in his side. He's a perfect fit. The problem is now on a practical level, I'm not really sure. Now, I mean, first off, Bill de Blasio may be one of the most unpopular politicians in the country. And for those who don't know, he's the mayor of New York City. I don't know how anyone at this point doesn't know who Bill de Blasio is. But, he's kind of been a bipartisan coming together guy of both sides hate him. Let's be honest, like both Republicans and Democrats dislike him for a very different group of reasons here. But it's very clear that he's kind of a joke at this point, and New York needs a better leader. I think I remember seeing him doing some like dance circles back last summer during the pandemic. He was like, let's dance away this problem and stuff. And it's like, okay, you're doing this, but restaurants and businesses have been shut down. Outdoor dining was banned. It's like they need leadership, not a dance circle and not a joke. So Bill de Blasio is odd, and New York is struggling under him. So that does help Yang a lot. So yeah, back to the practicality side. I'm not sure if some of the things Andrew Yang wants to do would actually be possible once he was elected mayor of New York. But then again, also as we saw a few nights ago in Biden's address to the nation, the Democratic Party is going bold and progressive, even to the point where moderates, kind of like myself, center left or center right, kind of criticize the New Deal. But now moderates on the left are actually thinking we need something similar. Biden's interesting because he may be one of the least ideological Democrats, but he's one of the more, or he actually has one of the most progressive agendas so far. This to me means that actually someone like Yang also might fit into this picture here. Because, in a typical time, during a normal existence, maybe the status quo of the old days, I don't think Yang's policies would be accepted. But the Democrats have shown us, and Biden has shown us, that it's possible. The Atlantic has I think, probably the best way to put this. They say that Yang's proposals are radical. He's obsessed with robots. He's never worked in government. And next year, he might be running New York. And I think people just want radical policies. Like, they're fine with radical policies as long as it also means effective government and better opportunities. And we're seeing that as long as the messenger isn't crazy, you can actually get a lot of stuff done. So maybe Yang's correct. But I'm going to stop ranting and kind of go into a background of why I think Yang is interesting. I've always liked him. He has a spotty track record. But anyways, he's really smart. He's likable. He's personable. And one thing I really applauded with him is that he went on, Joe Rogan, Sam Harris, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, probably if Jacobian or whatever that more kind of progressive magazine has, he probably went on that too. Like, he was willing to talk to anybody. And as someone who likes discussion and thinks we need more of it, I love that about him. But he's also really smart. And I'm sure most people know that, by 24, he was a corporate lawyer in New York, making over six figures a year, which is like right out of law school. He went to Brown and then Columbia Law. So, not too shabby to say the least. My issue, though, is that his career is spotty. There's a few good spots, but he seems almost sometimes to have too big of ideas for what actually needs to be accomplished. So from what I've gathered, Yang quit his corporate law job because he early on kind of recognized that he didn't want to work for someone else. He realized that he was a natural born leader. And so what happened is there's a tutoring company, an online tutoring company that I actually did some stuff using their platform when I was studying for my GRE and the LSAT back in the day. And it's called Manhattan GMAT. They have other ones as well. But he was actually the CEO, and he became a millionaire of Manhattan GMAT when Kaplan, another online education platform, bought Manhattan. And, he left the company but became a millionaire. And then in 2011, this is kind of his big claim to fame, I guess, was he started something called Venture for America, which, according to The Atlantic, was a glitzy, technology focused twist on Teach for America. From what I've gathered, and I don't know a lot about this company, I'll admit, is that basically what it was trying to do is find bright minds, maybe from cities or coastal regions, and get them to go work in places like Cleveland or Detroit or Tulsa or Maryland or Baltimore, places that maybe have kind of fallen into hard times, but also they're trying to incentivize investment, capital, startups in these places. And to me, it's kind of a cool idea. And Obama Obama's administration and Obama personally kind of called Yang this guy of the future. They thought that he was really looking at issues that needed to be addressed. And I do think Yang is right that there are plenty of beautiful, amazing cities that kind of get overlooked. And it'd be a great idea to bring more capital, industry, and hardworking younger people into these cities. So I like where he was going with that. Unfortunately, though, this company only made thousands of dollars. Not millions, not billions, thousands. And it didn't do too well. So the idea was, again, good, but it was really hard to carry that out. And that seems to me, at least, to be kind of a trend with Andrew Yang. The one thing, though, is that after Venture for America, he did, become connected with a lot of Silicon Valley, Wall Street, tech, and finance people. And that's kind of where he started to kind of craft his own political ideology. Obviously, he's on the left, but it's not your typical left ideology. Basically, what happened from Venture for America, to now during his presidential run and this discussion of universal basic income, is that Yang talked to a lot of tech people and developed his probably biggest campaign issue is that automation and robots are going to take jobs, and it's kind of a bipartisan, socioeconomic bipartisanship, if that's a word, I don't know, but basically his point is that radiologists, doctors, programmers, and cab drivers, truck drivers, factory workers, they're all going to be hit by this. It's not like if you're wealthier or have a white collar job, you're going to be saved from this. His point is that automation and tech are going to cause people to lose their source of income. And that's kind of where he drafted this universal basic income idea. Now, I do agree with him that jobs are going to be impacted, but I've kind of read contrasting points on this basically that talk about like maybe automation could take jobs long term, but also it might just change the economy and people might go into different fields or have more time to do things they want to. There's a lot of conversation to be had on that. Like Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*, really smart guy. He also wrote 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, and he basically thinks that automation isn't always bad. He's like, if surgeries can be done more effectively with a robot instead of a person, or if taxis have less accidents, if it's automated rather than having a driver, he's like, we shouldn't save jobs if automation can make the world better. And there's definitely a conversation to be had there. And I think that's where some of the criticism for Yang comes. But again, I'm going on a diatribe here, but that was kind of where Yang decided that his big thing was kind of keeping people around and, protecting people. And I think that's admirable. Finally, I've seen news outlets call for Yang's approach something called human-centered capitalism. And that sounds good, especially after the last year, like some of his ideas, like giving people a monthly stipend. It wasn't a month during the pandemic, but it kind of happened. And basically, he has some interesting policy ideas for New York. And some of them I like, others I don't really know about the practicality. But he wants to create a public banking network. He wants to give a UBI, universal basic income type of payment system for the basically bottom half of New York who are living in extreme poverty, which I think is important. Now he wants to turn New York into a hub of cryptocurrencies, which I think is interesting. He also wants to convert hotels into affordable housing. And interestingly enough, he also has quietly talked about cutting taxes. And now I'm thinking as I go here, but it's kind of obvious why people like Andrew Yang, right? Like he has a plan for everything. Like he's not just kind of bullshitting and going along. He knows exactly what he wants to do. And you all probably know that I think affordable housing is crucial. I really like that. Infrastructure in New York, like the subways, UBI, I think actually is a form of infrastructure, in my opinion. I think that's also good. The crypto thing could be interesting. I own, a little bit of Bitcoin and a few others, and I do think that the future is going to crypto. I do, through what means, I don't know, but I do think that's where things are going. So it's interesting to see. Now, I'm actually very curious, though, because he also talks about cutting taxes. He hasn't talked about that as much out loud, but he is talking about cutting taxes. And to me, that is bold and expensive because I hope he's been asked how he's going to do that. But if you're trying to, redo infrastructure like the subway system, you're trying to give people a universal basic income, you want to create a public banking system, just affordable housing from hotels. That's a lot of revenue that's being lost, in my opinion, especially with the hotels being converted into affordable housing. So cutting taxes is going to be complicated, and maybe he has a plan. He is a man with a plan, but I'm just not particularly sure how that happens. The other problem is that he's managed a tech nonprofit, a tutoring business, and then a campaign that, he dropped out after Iowa. He has also never worked in bureaucracy nor politics. He's also going to face political opposition. New York is a giant city. Being mayor of New York City is considered the second hardest job in the country, or maybe even the hardest job in the country. And also, it's just the scale and the political fraction issues. And also, there's the state of New York, which is always at odds with New York City. So he has a lot of things to do, and he has no experience doing it. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm not trying to really go one way or another because I think I would vote for him today just because I like the boldness. But it seems like there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here. I'll just reiterate, though, before we're out of here, that this could be the time and the perfect job for Yang and the Yang gang. The Democratic Party's bold, and their kind of more radical ideas are becoming more mainstream. That's kind of true for both sides for different reasons. But, Trump won without political records, without political success. He barely had any business success. AOC, same with her. So if you use that standard, Yang is more than qualified. At least he's ran nonprofits. He's a law graduate. Like, there's a lot of things in there that could make him qualified. Like I said, I would vote for him. And Biden is doing something interesting that I think is a framework for people like Biden and Yang. He is offering a very liberal and ideological agenda while not being an ideological person. I think there's something more palatable about policies when they're not coming from someone who's kind of toxic. Like AOC talking about some of these things, she just comes off as more toxic, or even Bernie, because you kind of know where the energy's coming from, or Trump on the other side. That's why, this is a whole other thing, but that's why I think Ron DeSantis could do better than Trump, because he's like a more palatable Trump. And so I think Yang could be a palatable progressive because he's likable. He talks to people. He listens. He's willing to talk to the other side. But his policies are quite progressive. So we're going to see. Basically, what I think is happening here, and it's kind of tying this into the U.S. as a whole, is that we saw a couple nights ago on Biden's not State of the Union but address to both houses. Biden's approach has always been different, but he's almost become in this presidency the antithesis to Reaganism. Reaganism created distrust in the federal government. It was a lot of narrative and messaging about how the government is always bad, and then ironically, conservatives cut federal spending, because of this narrative. But Biden's is something that Drew and I talked about. Like, government spending's going up. So it's going up either way. So we might as well make effective government. And I think people like Yang are looking towards the future. They're like, it's going to cost a lot right now. But if we create better social infrastructure in a place like New York City, it'll probably help. Because let's be honest, I've seen pictures of New York City over the last year. And it's kind of bleak. Like, yeah, there's some cool art that's coming up, and it's seeming like this kind of hip place in some ways. But also all the money's leaving. And the crime is going up. And I think you need someone to come in and fix it. And, In the 70s that happened in New York during that last big crime wave they had. And you need a fixer, and Yang is maybe a 21st century fixer. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Can the Yang Gang save New York?